Hello everyone, welcome to True Horror Anecdotes. Enjoy! I'm a female, and this happened to me during my first year of university in October. I was living in the dorms at the time, but before I get into this story, I need to give you a brief rundown of the dorms. You need a key card to gain access to your specific floor. So even though someone on the 3rd and 4th floor lives in the same building, they can't access each other's floors. I had injured myself playing sports, so I was under orders to rest up, which meant no Halloween parties for me. What a bummer. Pretty sad for a horror fiend like myself. But to try and make the time a happy one, I kept myself occupied by helping make costumes for people and doing their makeup. Once I was finally finished, I packed up my makeup and decided to watch some movies in my room. A guy popped up and introduced himself. We chatted for a bit and exchanged email addresses. Then, I walked back to my room and said goodnight. Well, the first warning sign was that he walked into my room behind me, despite me saying I was going to walk into my room. I felt really awkward and tried to say, in a roundabout way, that he needed to leave, but he wasn't getting the hint. So I finally said, "You need to leave my room now." He left immediately after, and I chalked this up to him maybe being drunk or something, but I did wonder how he got onto my floor if he wasn't with anyone partying. Before I went to bed that night, I checked my email and there were 5 new messages from this creep. The first being, "Hey, I'm so glad that we're friends." And in the rest of the messages, he was asking why I wasn't online. A few days later, I got a knock on my door while I was studying, and guess who it was? It was him. I explained that I was studying and needed privacy. He then tried to walk into my room again, but I braced my arm on the frame and said firmly again that I needed to study. He finally got the memo and left. The next day, he was at my door again. Oh my goodness, can this guy just leave me alone? I began pretending that I was not home. The following day, there was a knock at the door, and when I checked the peephole, there was no one there. I assumed the postman had come, so I opened the door, and lo and behold, it was the creepy guy. Now he started hiding from the peephole, so I would be more likely to answer the door. Can you believe this guy? I told my roommate never to open the door if he was there, and then I told the people living on my floor that this guy was beginning to creep me out, so if he wanted to get on the floor or whatever sob story he gave them, I told them not to let him on the floor, please. A few days after that, I was on the bus coming home and I got a text from someone who lived on my floor telling me not to come home because Mr. Creep was on my floor and he was sitting in front of my door, just waiting for me. To hell with that, I went to a friend's house and spent the night. When I got home, I was told he waited for 4 hours before leaving. At this point, I was getting freaked out. A few days after that, he began waiting outside the building, and if I left, he would follow me wherever I went. I was too spineless to tell him to go away, and I tried to be more passive about it. I never spoke a word to him, and I never gave him any indication that I was paying attention. But he still followed me to class and the cafeteria. He always tried to follow me home and get access to the floor. I went to the resident advisor, an older student who sort of watches over the floor, and told her what happened. She spoke to the RA for his floor, and was told that Mr. Creep had been telling his own RA that we were best friends and dating. My RA tried to explain that I was uncomfortable, but the other RA believed him, and that was that. Thankfully, one thing did deter him. He would never approach me if I was with a group of people, so my floor mates banded together. If I went to dinner, I went with my floor, and if I wanted a drink or seconds, someone had to come with me. Walking to class and even waiting for the bus was done in a group. He got onto my floor once when someone else was coming home and he forced his foot in the door to let himself in. I was hidden in another room, and when he left my door to go and sit in the television lounge to wait for me, I went downstairs and ran around to the other side of the building and got into my room before he noticed. Then the phone calls began. I never gave him my number, but he somehow obtained my mobile and room phone number. At first, it would be 1 to 2 phone calls a day from him, until I told him I wanted him to leave me alone. Then the calls began coming in every hour with him begging and pleading for me to talk to him. Without caller ID, I needed to answer the phone because of school and my part-time job. At this point, it was November and I was a wreck. I was tired of having to plan out doing simple things like going for food or walking to a bus stop. Stress wasn't helping me recover from my injury and I was losing weight and I just looked sickly. I went back to the RA and begged her to help me. She went to the head of the dorms and explained everything that happened. I explained how far this had gone, and my roommate told them that he had followed her a few times, demanding that she tell him where I was. I felt awful. She never told me this because she was afraid of upsetting me further, and I felt like I was an asshole for putting her through this garbage. I don't know what went on behind closed doors, but from what I can guess, he was told to leave me alone, and any further contact would result in him being kicked out of the dorms. There was one email where he went insane on me, telling me how awful I was and things like, how could I do this to him? He said that we were so happy together and that surely I was cheating on him with other men. This guy was a total nutcase. After that, nothing. At first, when I'd see him around campus, I would run to the women's restroom to hide. I'd see him around town or on campus, and he'd always just stare at me. He never tried to approach me or get my attention. Just staring. Real creepy. I used to walk by and try to pretend like I didn't notice him staring, and I'd try and act like my heart wasn't pounding. It's been a few months now. Haven't seen or heard from him since. And let's just hope it stays that way. A couple years back, when I was in college, I was the victim of a long-term stalker. I'm a male, and I was 20 at the time. Things started out fairly innocuous on Valentine's Day. I started to receive secret admirer-type text messages from an unknown number. I assumed it was a friend of mine playing a joke on me as I was in a room with a handful of tech-savvy people at the time. I tried to gauge their reactions and asked if anyone was messing with me. They all denied it, and I believed them, even though they were all pretty bad liars. Well, it was further confirmed that it was none of them when I got a phone call from that same unknown number. I answered, and a female voice on the other end asked, "Is this Andy?" I'm not gonna lie, she sounded kinda cute. Yes, I replied. "Who is this?" I asked, hoping I could get a response and identify the voice. At that point, they hung up and resumed texting. Things started to get weird when the person began asking pretty personal questions, including repeatedly asking, "Are you doing something tonight?" To which I replied, "Yes. I was working that night, but they kept insisting we should meet up." On top of all this, I was getting various images sent to me from a separate email address. The email address was at TextNow. I knew TextNow is an app where you can get a temporary phone number. This confirmed it wasn't a real number, and now I had a username to connect this person to. I don't know if it was their intention, but I actually enjoy trying to figure out shit like this and took it upon myself to expose this person without giving away anything about myself. So I kept it up, I texted them back for a while and dug out more and more information about the person, compiling it into a profile and eliminating possibilities. Unfortunately, this just encouraged them, as they insisted I send them pictures. Then they sent me a very odd picture. It was a picture of a white lacy dress hanging in their closet with the accompanying text, "My wedding dress for when I marry you," with various heart and love emojis. What the fuck? I thought to myself. Is this person being serious? They continued to pry about where I was going to be that evening, and I still refused to give details. Then, they told me where they were going to be, a party on campus that night. I couldn't go regardless. I was working. Then I got another bombshell. They asked if I lived in apartment 68, which I did. I recognized the style of the apartment they were in based on a picture they sent from earlier, so I decided I'd throw a curveball. "You live in this complex, right?" I sent them a picture of the apartment complex. "What? How do you know?" They responded. I just told them that I recognized their door. All the shitty apartments had the same color door frame, which was visible on the edge of a picture they sent. The conversation kind of fizzled out after that. I didn't go to that party and didn't get any more texts. Fast forward to October. The following school year, I was a senior and busy as hell. One evening, I got a text from an unknown number. "Is this Andy Vega?" They said my full name. So I played dumb, pretending like I wasn't freaking out that after many months this person was contacting me again and I still hadn't figured out who it was. These questions were instantly more personal and really weirded me out. "Okay, who is this?" I asked. "Don't ruin the fun. Not knowing who I am is part of the mystery. I won't tell you who I am, not now. Too much to lose. I don't want you to know. Not because I'm being cruel, but it's just better if you didn't know." Yeah, whatever. I'm pretty tired of this shit. I'm trying to work, but I do want to see if I can pick out any more details. So I'm doing the bare minimum to keep this going. It was December, the end of the semester, and they proceeded to call me multiple times. I blocked every call, but they kept calling. I think there were like 14 calls that night. I turned my phone off after that. The following week, I was in class and students were presenting their final work on the projector. I'd queued multiple tabs on the projection computer. 2 different students had their work saved on Google Drive. When the student logged into their account, they didn't open a private window, so it logged out the first student. I saw this happen, but the first student wasn't in the room, so when she came back, I asked her to log back in. We were both standing in the projection booth. She was at one end on the computer, and I was messing with the sound system on the other side, but happened to turn and look at the projector screen when she was logging into Google. This hit me like a ton of bricks. The username she logged in with was the same username as the TextNow account that had been sending me photos. I quickly turned away and pretended to be busy with something until she finished opening her work. I thanked her, and she left the booth without realizing her mistake. I tried to play it cool, but inside I was going crazy for the rest of the class. After almost a year, I knew who it was. She finally slipped up, and honestly, I was much more scared now than I had ever been. This person had a history of being pretty creepy around my friends, and although she had never personally interacted with me outside of class, all my friends had strange experiences. I made a meeting with a counselor who seemed to really care and offered to look into it. A couple of weeks later, I got an email from the counselor saying that this student is going abroad next semester, so we're not going to do anything. I insisted that at least something temporary be put into place. They didn't do anything, but what did I expect? This school is pretty notorious for not giving a shit anyway. I didn't run into her again after that. She hasn't texted me either. So for the time being, that is where the story ends. I'm a female, and I've had a couple of stalkers. The one that freaked me out the most was in another country, and we never met. His name is Michael. This all started after we met on a website for pen pals. He lived in another country. Our conversations were great at first, but he soon developed feelings extremely fast. I liked Michael a lot in the beginning. Our relationship became sexual in nature, we made plans to meet, etc. I was, however, concerned with some things that I considered to be red flags, and this was confirmed by my friends and family. I decided to back off a bit. He didn't like that at all. I was super beta, so I tried to keep the peace without hurting or losing him. I started lying to him, out of fear. He'd interrogate me for hours about where I was going and who I was with. If I went to a party, he'd ask if I slept with anyone, and then say he'd kind of hoped I had, so I could tell him how the sex was. It was getting to be too much. I was no longer interested in him romantically or sexually, but I would still engage with him sexually because I was afraid of him. In the meantime, I met and fell in love with my current boyfriend, who is absolutely wonderful. But of course, after he found out about the new guy, he began stalking me. He was obsessed with everything about my new relationship and wouldn't leave me alone. I finally realized that my ex-stalker made me feel disgusting, and that I should not be involved with someone who I was afraid of and disgusted by. I told him I didn't want to hear from him ever again. He ignored me. My boyfriend contacted him and told him to leave me alone. He tried to interrogate my boyfriend about the nature of our relationship, but my boyfriend shut him down. I blocked him on everything. Later, I realized that he was still reading my blog, so I deleted the whole thing. He made new email accounts and Facebook accounts constantly. He relentlessly Googled me and my boyfriend. to the point that our names were amongst the top searches on multiple search engines. When he got no response, he started sending my boyfriend screenshots of times we had been sexual. I was humiliated. But since I had been 100% honest with my boyfriend, it didn't break us up. But my boyfriend was obviously angry and disgusted. We never responded to anything he sent. To my knowledge, he still creeps on us, but after that, everything mostly stopped. I know he's thousands of miles away and I've had stalkers who were in my immediate area, but he still scares me the most. This was a crazy experience. Let me give you a little backstory. I'm a 20-year-old, short, petite female, and I was working at Subway at the time. I'm a calm person and I can't help but be nice to anyone, even if they creep me out. I feel bad usually. Well, about a year ago, we had this guy who was between 35 to 40 years old. He would come in every day for lunch. He was fascinated by my stretched ears and few piercings I had on my face and always asked questions. He would sit down after I rang him out and watch me from his table for 2 hours. Non-stop just staring at me while I helped other customers. This continued like clockwork for about 2 weeks straight. Every day, he would ask for my number, saying he has plugs and tunnels he wants to give me and see me wearing them in my ears, but I always politely declined. One day, I'm alone in the store because my manager had to run to the bank. We were really slow that day, so I was just in the back room messing around on my phone. I heard the door chime, looked up, and yet no one was there. Then I saw the man walk past the front of the store really quickly, like he was in a hurry. Then the store phone rings. "Thanks for calling Subway. How can I help you?"
Hey, this is the girl with the nice ears, right?
Yes? Who is this?
Are you alone in the back room right now? Are you working by yourself?
At this point, I got really creeped out and knew it was him. Why would he want to know if I'm working by myself? I hung up and texted my manager the situation so she would hurry back. He called again, this time asking me very weird questions, like what I would do with him in a room with the door locked if I had a boyfriend, or why I was playing hard to get, etc. My manager got back and I told her everything. In the middle of the lunch rush, he calls again. This time my manager answers, and to this day she never told me what he said, but the look on her face made my spine shiver. She told him if he ever called again or showed up here, she would call the police. I thought that was the end of it, but alas, I was wrong. About a week later, I'm clocking out and getting ready to walk to my car parked in the front, and when I look outside, I see him standing by my car and looking inside of it. I was an idiot and left a back door unlocked. I watched him crawl inside and shut the door. Not even kidding. This creep was trying to hide in my back seat and do God knows what to me when I got in. My manager locked the front door of our store and called the police. When they arrived, they had to pretty much drag him out of my car, and he was arrested on the scene. The cops searched him and found a butcher knife, rope, and a rag with chloroform on it. If I hadn't looked up when I did, I probably wouldn't be here right now. I'm just grateful that Creep was arrested. This happened to me a few years ago. I'm a female and my anxiety was super high at the time. I was already at a point in my life where I thought I was a little out of it, but that was amplified by a lot when I kept repeatedly hearing noises outside my window. This kept happening every single night. It just wouldn't stop. I would finally get so freaked out that I'd go wake my parents up and get them to look outside, but they never found anything. I started to think I was going crazy or just subconsciously seeking attention. One morning, my grandfather discovered one of our lawn chairs beneath our bathroom window. It's pretty high up and the bottom pane is fogged. So I'm not sure if the chair even helped, but it was left there regardless. The next night, I heard sounds again. Then, the following night, we checked outside and discovered something that made my stomach churn. A small stepladder was sitting directly outside of my window. It was backed just enough to allow someone to sit on it, but still see through my windows. There was a bag of McDonald's, which is just up the street from me. Most of the food was still in there. It was cold, but still. Somebody had been watching me doing absolutely nothing of interest in my room without me knowing for I don't know how long. This creeped me out and I called the cops, but of course, they were no help, because whoever it was that was out there was long gone by now. I felt crazier than ever, but at least we had some evidence that someone was hovering around our house at my window, watching intently through the blinds, in a space between the two curtains. I heard noises the next night, so I ran outside and there was nothing. Earlier in the night, I'd sewn my curtains together, which hopefully made it harder to see in. Apparently, it did because now they started climbing on top of our air conditioning unit, and from there, he'd climb onto our garbage. He would be standing so he could see above where the drapes went. We saw handprints and shoe prints on the lid to prove that he was there. I should also mention that there were now holes in my screen, and I heard when these holes were made. He took a stick and sharpened it somehow. We know because we found it outside my window. This guy was trying to be stealthy and break away the screen bit by bit. The holes are still there. The following night, I was lying in bed about to fall asleep when all of a sudden, I distinctly heard the sound of gravel crunching near my window. There was simply no mistaking the sound. As stealthily as I could, I let out a small moan, which he surely heard, and I rolled just out of view as if I were sleeping. Then, I pressed myself against a wall out of view of the window, very quietly opened my door and crept down the hall. My heart was pounding. Normally I knock on my parents' door, but I knew the slightest sound would make the bastard bolt, so I quietly opened their door and sneaked in, then informed them that there was, without a single doubt, someone outside my window. They didn't mind the intrusion and got up, got dressed, formulated a plan, and crept to the back door. I ran to the bathroom to stand on the edge of our tub to peek out the window just as the back door was thrown open and my parents ran outside. And sure enough, they saw him. They started screaming as the man leaped off the garbage and bolted down our driveway, which was what I was looking at. They screamed all sorts of horrible things at the tops of their lungs. He ended up escaping across the street, hiding behind a house adjacent to us. The balls on this bastard. He kept peeking out at us as we all stood outside, but we wanted to leave him there so the cops could finally nab him. We called the cops. They came and searched the whole area, but they never found him. The bastard must have hopped a fence or some shit. Still to this day, I hear sounds outside my window, even in the dead of winter, but he's never out there. He might have just been a peeper, but he targeted me specifically and for months until he was almost caught. What really pisses me off is that once he lost interest in me because it was too unsafe, he moved on to a house down the street with 2 little girls. He actually managed to get in through their window, and their dad caught him just standing in the middle of the room, watching them sleep. I still don't think he was caught, even then. All I know is that it could have been way worse, but it messed me up. I trust the men in my neighborhood even less now. The men around here stare very blatantly. I've been chased home by one. I've had a guy try to jerk me into his car when I was passing him, telling him no, I didn't need a ride and to leave me alone. All these years later, I still hear shit outside my window and freak out. I turn out my lights entirely to exercise. I do my best to avoid the windows when I undress. This whole thing left me scarred even though it wasn't a huge deal.